When a client beat me until my face was swollen and every breath stabbed like broken glass, the girls from my own country looked at me on the floor.
My name is Ava Diop. I'm 27 years old, and I was in escort work for a little over a year and a half. Before any of that, I was just a girl from Dakar who spent most of her free time with headphones on, repeating French phrases out loud while she helped her mother sort tomatoes and onions at the market. I liked the way the language felt in my mouth. Clean, precise, like it belonged to a different world from the one where we lived in a small apartment that always smelled a little like smoke and dried fish. My father used to bring home leftover fruit from his stall at the end of the day. After he was gone, it was just my mother and me, trying to stretch every franc. She never complained out loud, but I could see how tired her eyes got by evening. I was good in school. Not the top of the class, but solid. Teachers liked that I actually did the homework. French was my favorite. I used to stay after class sometimes just to ask extra questions.
At home, I'd practice by talking to myself in the mirror or reading whatever books I could find. My biggest dream was simple. Get to France somehow, study, get a real job, send money back, and make my mother proud. I didn't want anything flashy, just a normal life where the rent was paid and nobody looked at us like we were always one step from trouble. When I turned 18, that dream got louder. I finished a long French course that a local association ran for free. The teacher there knew people who sometimes helped young people find temporary work or housing in Paris. It wasn't an official scholarship or anything, just a chain of acquaintances. One day, a woman called my mother and said there was a chance for me to go, stay with some other Senegalese girls at first, look for cleaning jobs or whatever I could find while the papers sorted themselves out. My mother cried when she told me. Happy tears, I think. She kept saying, "You're going to make it. I know you will." The weeks before I left were busy in a quiet way. I packed one suitcase, mostly clothes that could pass for presentable. I practiced saying bonjour and merci with different tones like it would somehow make me more French. Neighbors came by with small gifts, soap, a scarf, a little money folded in paper. My mother cooked my favorite dishes almost every night, even though we couldn't really afford it. We didn't talk much about how hard things had been since my father died. We just moved around each other in the kitchen, packing containers of food I probably wouldn't be able to take on the plane. The night before my flight, I sat on the roof of our building with her. Dakar was loud below us. Cars, music, people shouting. She held my hand and said she believed I could build something better. That was the last time I felt completely safe in a simple way, like the world still made sense. In Paris, everything looked different right away. The streets were wider, the buildings taller, the air colder than I expected. The girls I was supposed to stay with met me at the station. They seemed friendly enough at first. We shared a small apartment in a noisy neighborhood. I spent my first weeks walking around with a map, trying to figure out the metro, applying for any job that didn't ask for perfect papers yet. I sent short messages home almost every day so my mother wouldn't worry. At night, I would lie in bed and listen to the city and tell myself this was just the hard beginning of the life I had always wanted. The first weeks in Paris felt exciting in a tired kind of way. I woke up early every day, put on the nicest clothes I had, and went out with a small notebook full of addresses. Cleaning agencies, restaurants, stores that might need someone who spoke French. Most places looked at my papers and said they were still incomplete. Come back later.
Later started to feel like a word people used when they didn't want to say no to your face. Money went faster than I expected. The shared apartment wasn't free. Everyone chipped in for rent and food. I sent whatever I could to my mother every couple of weeks. She never asked for much, but I could hear in her voice that things at home were tight. One night she mentioned, almost casually, that some relatives had been asking about the old hospital bills from when my father was sick. She tried to brush it off, but I knew she was worried. That sat in my chest for days. The girls I lived with were from Senegal too. At first, it felt comforting. Someone who understood the food, the jokes, the way we missed home. But little things started to grind. Someone would finish the rice and not replace it. Arguments about whose turn it was to clean the bathroom. One of them would come home late and talk loudly on the phone while the rest of us tried to sleep. I kept telling myself it was temporary.
We were all just trying to survive. I got a few short cleaning jobs through a friend of a friend, cash under the table. The hours were long and my back hurt by the end of the day. I'd come home, wash my hands until they were raw, and count what I had left. It was never enough. One month, the electricity bill came higher than expected. We all looked at each other in the kitchen, and nobody wanted to be the first to say they couldn't cover their share. Loneliness crept in quietly. I would walk the streets after looking for work and realize I didn't really know anyone outside that apartment. Calling my mother helped for a few minutes, then made the distance feel bigger. I started sleeping more during the day, just to make the hours pass. Some mornings I didn't want to get up at all. The dream that had felt so clear back in Dakar was starting to look smaller and farther away. I still believed things would turn around. I just didn't know how much longer I could keep pretending they already had. The girls started talking about it one evening like it was nothing special. We were sitting in the kitchen after another long day of me coming home empty-handed. One of them said there was a way to make real money fast. "Just going out with men," she said. "Nice hotels sometimes. They pay well if you look clean and speak a little French." I laughed at first. I thought she was joking. Then I saw her face and realized she wasn't. I said no right away. Told them I wasn't that kind of person. I still believed I could find something legitimate if I just kept looking. So I tried harder. I went to more agencies. I asked every Senegalese person I met if they knew of any openings. I even considered going back to the cleaning jobs that paid almost nothing, just to keep some cash coming in. Nothing stuck. My share of the rent was late 2 months in a row. The girls weren't mean about it, but the looks got colder. I called my mother and told her things were slow. She said not to worry, that God would open a door. But I could hear the strain in her voice. Those old debts from my father's illness were still hanging over her. I lay in bed that night staring at the ceiling, doing the math over and over. What I needed to send home, what the apartment cost, how long the little money I had left would last. I told myself it was temporary if I ever did it, just a few times until the papers cleared and a real job showed up. I kept repeating that. Temporary, not forever, not who I was, just a bridge. I felt sick even thinking about it. Shame sat heavy in my stomach. I thought about my mother and how she would look at me if she knew. I thought about the girl who used to practice French in the mirror and dreamed of a clean, normal life. One afternoon, the same girl sat next to me on the couch and said the offer was still there. A man who paid well, nothing complicated, and I wouldn't even have to do it alone the first time if I didn't want to. She made it sound almost ordinary. I stared at the floor for a long time. My throat felt tight. Finally, I heard myself say the word I had been fighting for weeks. "Okay," I said, just once. To see. One of the girls, the one who talked the most, said she'd take me. We left the apartment around 8. I wore the only dress I owned that didn't look like something from the market back home. She checked my makeup in the hallway mirror and told me to smile more. We took the metro 2 stops and then walked. The building was one of those older ones with a heavy wooden door and a code pad that beeped when she punched in the numbers. Inside, it smelled like floor polish and someone cooking onions. We went up to the 3rd floor. She knocked twice. A man opened the door. He was maybe in his 40s, gray at the temples, wearing a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up. He looked at me, then at her, and said something in French I only half caught. She answered for me, quick and bright, like she did this all the time. Then she turned to me and said, "You're fine. Just be nice. He already paid the agency part." She left. The door clicked shut. The apartment was small but clean. One living room with a couch, a low table, a television that was off. He asked if I wanted water. I said yes because I didn't know what else to say. He poured it into a glass and set it down. We sat on the couch with space between us. He asked where I was from. I said Senegal. He nodded like that meant something. Then he asked how long I'd been in Paris. I said a few months. The conversation kept dying. Long silences where the only sound was a clock somewhere in the kitchen. He stood up after a while and said we should go to the other room. I followed him. The bedroom had a double bed with white sheets and a window that looked out onto a courtyard. He told me to relax. I sat on the edge of the bed and took my shoes off, because that felt like the normal thing to do. He talked a little more, nothing important, just instructions about what he expected. I nodded. My hands were cold. The next part is hard to put into words without making it sound like something else. It happened. I stayed in my body, but also somewhere outside it, watching the clock on the nightstand. When it was over, he stood up first and went to the bathroom. I put my dress back on and waited by the door. He came out, opened a drawer, and handed me an envelope. Cash. More than I had made in 3 weeks of cleaning. He said thank you in a flat voice and walked me to the door. Outside, the air felt colder than before. I walked to the metro with the envelope in my bag. On the train, I sat with my arms crossed, staring at the floor. Nobody looked at me. When I got back to the apartment, the girls were watching television. One of them asked how it went. I said fine. I went to the bathroom, locked the door, and washed my hands for a long time. That night, I lay in bed, listening to the others talk in the next room, and realized something small and permanent had shifted inside me. I wasn't the same person who had left the apartment a few hours earlier. The money came in faster than I ever imagined. After that first time, I did 2 more, then 4. Within a month, I could send my mother enough to cover the old hospital debts and still have cash left for myself. I bought her a new phone and paid 3 months of rent on the apartment back in Dakar. When she called and her voice sounded lighter, I told myself that was the reason I kept going. The girls started taking me to nicer places, hotels with soft carpets and people who didn't look twice when we walked through the lobby. One client flew me to Lyon for a weekend, business class. I had never been on a plane like that. The seat leaned almost flat, and a woman brought me a hot towel. I sat there staring out the window thinking, this can't be real. Another time, a man gave me a small box with a gold bracelet inside. I wore it for a week and then sold it because the money felt more useful. I bought clothes that actually fit, real brands, not the market stuff. One afternoon, I walked into a store near the Champs-Élysées and tried on a coat that cost more than my mother made in 2 months. I paid cash and left with the bag swinging at my side. That night, I ate in a restaurant where the waiter poured wine without asking the price. I kept waiting for someone to tell me I didn't belong there. There were strange nights, too. A man who only wanted me to sit across from him while he worked on his laptop and talked about his divorce. Another who asked me to accompany him to a private dinner where everyone spoke in low voices about deals I didn't understand. I overheard things, names of politicians, numbers that sounded like they belonged in movies. Nobody explained the rules, but I learned them fast. Don't ask questions, don't look surprised, smile when they expect it. Every week something shifted. First it was the money, then it was the clothes, then it was the way I walked into a hotel without checking the prices on the menu. The apartment started to feel small and loud. One of the girls moved out and I took her room. I stopped applying for cleaning jobs. The papers were still incomplete, but it didn't feel urgent anymore. I told myself it was still temporary, just until I had enough saved. But the truth is, I stopped counting the days. One evening, I stood in front of a hotel mirror in a dress someone else had paid for and realized I no longer felt like I was pretending. This was just my life now. The other version of me, the one who practiced French in a small kitchen in Dakar, felt farther away every time I closed the door behind me. The months blurred together after that. I stopped counting how many times I left the apartment at night. Clients started asking for longer hours, then for things that had nothing to do with the original agreement.
One man wanted me to pretend I was someone else the whole evening. Different name, different story about where I grew up. I did it without thinking. Another only spoke to me in short commands and left the money on the table like I wasn't even in the room. I learned to read faces in the first 30 seconds. Who would talk too much? Who would get angry if I checked my phone? Who expected me to laugh at everything? I started deleting messages every night before I slept. Fake stories about working late at a hotel became automatic. When my mother called on my birthday, I told her I was at a friend's place. I missed her voice that day more than I expected. The girls in the apartment stopped asking where I was going. We barely talked anymore except about money and schedules.
Old friends from the French course stopped texting. I didn't notice until one of them posted a photo from a gathering I wasn't invited to. Sleeping during the day became normal. I'd wake up around 3 in the afternoon, drink coffee, check the phone for the next booking. Nights stretched long. Sometimes a client would cancel at the last minute, and the relief hit me harder than I wanted to admit. Other times the night went longer than planned, and I'd walk home at dawn with my shoes in my hand, counting the cash in my bag under a streetlight. Expensive places stopped impressing me. Hotel lobbies all looked the same after a while. The food at those restaurants tasted fine, but I stopped remembering what I ordered. One evening, a man took me to a private club where everyone knew each other. He introduced me with a name that wasn't mine, and then ignored me for 2 hours while he talked business. I sat there smiling and nodding, already planning the fastest way out when it ended. I carried cash everywhere. I checked the exits in every room without realizing I was doing it. Lies came out of my mouth before I even decided to tell them. I'm fine. Work is good. I'll visit soon. The version of me that used to get excited about a new coat or a business class seat felt like someone I used to know. I made excuses for things that would have stopped me cold a year earlier, staying longer than I wanted, accepting clients the other girls warned me about, pretending I didn't notice when the money they promised was short. One night I came back to the apartment and realized I couldn't remember what day it was. The calendar on the kitchen wall was still stuck on the previous month. I stood there looking at it for a long time. Then I went to my room, counted the money, and set an alarm for the next booking. It didn't feel strange anymore. It just felt like Tuesday, or Wednesday, whatever day it was. The booking that night looked ordinary. One of the girls had set it up. Same as always, a hotel near the Périphérique, nothing fancy. I took the metro and walked the last few blocks. The man met me in the lobby. He seemed quiet at first, almost polite. We went up to the room. Everything started the way it usually did. I don't remember the exact moment it turned. 1 second he was talking, the next his voice changed. He got angry about something small. Maybe I looked at my phone. Maybe I didn't answer fast enough. He hit me. Hard. More than once. I tried to get to the door, but he blocked it. When he finally stopped, I was on the floor. My face felt wrong. Every breath hurt like something was broken inside my chest. I got out somehow. I don't know how long it took. I walked and then ran until I found a taxi. The driver looked at me in the mirror but didn't ask questions. I gave him the address of the apartment. By the time I climbed the stairs, my legs were shaking. I opened the door and the girls were in the living room, watching something on the television. I stood there holding the wall. My face was already swelling. I could taste blood. I asked them to call a doctor, or just help me get to a hospital. One of them looked at me and said they didn't want problems with the police. Another said it was my fault for going alone. Nobody stood up. Nobody offered a hand when I almost fell. They just kept watching the screen. I sat on the floor for a few minutes because standing made the pain worse. Then I understood something clear and final. These women were not my sisters. They were using me the same way the clients did. I went to my room, put a few clothes in a bag, and walked out the same night. My keys stayed on the table. I didn't say goodbye. Outside, it was cold and quiet. I walked until I found a church I had visited once months earlier. There was a Senegalese woman there who sometimes helped people from home. She opened the door when I knocked, looked at my face, and let me in without asking many questions. She gave me water and a place to sit. That was the first time in a long while someone treated me like a person who needed help instead of a problem to manage. I knew right then I was never going back to that apartment or to any of those bookings. The life I had been living ended on that floor, in that living room, when the people who were supposed to be my own turned away. Leaving wasn't one clean decision. That night I walked out, but the next weeks were messy. The woman from the church let me stay on her couch for a few days. She didn't ask many questions. I changed my number. I stopped answering messages from the old apartment. One of the girls tried calling from a different phone. I hung up and blocked it. I moved to another neighborhood across the city. A small room in a shared flat with people who didn't know anything about me. The first month, I barely slept. Every time someone knocked, I thought it was them coming to drag me back or make trouble.
I started cleaning jobs again. Hotels, offices, whatever paid cash. The money was nothing compared to before. Some nights I sat on the floor counting coins and wondered if I had made a mistake. Nightmares came hard. I'd wake up tasting blood even though nothing was there. Panic attacks hit in the middle of the metro or while I was mopping a hallway. My hands would shake and I'd have to step outside until it passed. I felt ashamed every time I looked in the mirror. Ashamed that I had stayed so long. Ashamed that I had trusted those girls. Ashamed that my mother still didn't know the real reason I had stopped sending as much money. I tried therapy once through a free clinic. The woman was kind, but I couldn't tell her everything. Talking about it out loud made it feel too real. Support groups for women in similar situations existed, but I never went. I was afraid of being recognized.
Loneliness became the new normal. I stopped trusting people easily. Even simple conversations felt risky. Slowly, the days got longer. I enrolled in a short course for administrative work. I learned how to fill out forms without panic. I started cooking again, simple meals. Some wounds closed, others stayed open. I still flinch at certain voices. I still check exits when I enter a room. I never contacted those girls again. I never went back to that side of the city. Today I live in a quiet building on the other side of Paris. I clean offices in the morning and study in the afternoon. My mother thinks I'm doing fine. I tell her partial truths. The old life feels far away most days, but it never fully leaves. When people ask how I got here, I usually change the subject. I saved myself the night they left me on that floor. That is the only thing I know for sure. Everything else is still being rebuilt, one ordinary day at a time.